Welcome back, Keri Mangis.
Hi, thank you. And thank you for welcoming me back, and thank you for spending your Sunday morning here today, where the theme this month is going with the flow. Now, we speakers always get these themes a few weeks in advance, so we have some time to think about them and ruminate on them and decide maybe what angle we might take on them. And when I got this one, I thought it was going to be pretty straightforward. Going with the flow, we were going to talk about what it means to be adaptable, what it means to be able to shift gears in your life. I was going to talk about how going with the flow brings up the idea of resiliency, being able to bounce back so that as you move through hardships in life, you don't become hard yourself. So we were going to spend some time talking about resiliency. And then I thought I would talk about how we could, instead of saying go with the flow, we could say be like water. Right? Because it means to flow. And then I thought, well, we could talk about how there's so many different kinds of water in the world. Everything from the frozen ice to the vapor to all of the liquid forms in between. There's the powerful waterfall and the majestic, beautiful lakes and the, trickling streams. There's hot springs, there's clear spring ponds, there's the rain coming down, there's tsunamis, there's all of these forms of water in our world. So then, to be like water would mean to know what form you need to show up as each day. Because sometimes in your life, you might need to be a tsunami, right? There might be a need for an upheaval. And other times, you get to be that majestic lake and invite people to your shores for connection and compassion and healing. And still other times, perhaps you are the clear spring pond and you invite people in for reflection, your own and theirs as well. So this was the path I was planning on going down today in our talk. And I was going to end by saying, be like water, strong enough to know that you can change the shape of the earth itself, but wise and patient enough to know that these things take time. Had it all planned. Would have been a great talk, right, if we lived in a different kind of world. I am an Ayurvedic practitioner, and I am one who believes that the world out there and our inner world are not disconnected. That what is happening out there is happening in here, that the outer world is our teacher and our messenger. And to do a talk that is about going with the flow of life, growing, expanding, and moving forward in a world that is undoing and unraveling and falling apart is a disservice to what I believe as an Ayurvedic practitioner and as a healer. I live by and bring into my practice the philosophical expressions, all is one, and as above, so below. These expressions mean that we are the earth. We hold the earth, the water, the fire, the air, and the ether within us. And that's also what makes up the universe. And it kind of sounds like a spiritual construct, right? But this past weekend, I went to go see Neil deGrasse Tyson at the State Theater. Is anyone familiar with him? Extraordinary man, astrophysicist, author, and very entertaining speaker if you ever have the chance. And he had a set of slides that spoke to this same concept from a scientific perspective. So on one side it said, here are the elements that the universe is made up of, in order of quantity. Number 1, hydrogen. Number 2, oxygen. Number 3, helium. Number 4, carbon. Number 5, nitrogen. And then other. And then he had the elements that the human body is made of, in order of quantity. Number 1, hydrogen, oxygen, no helium, Maybe that's okay. Carbon, nitrogen, and other. So science also agrees that we are made of the stars. So the outside world is in a stage right now that the yogis call the Kali Yuga Age, or the age of destruction, the age of undoing. We are in a time where norms no longer seem to mean anything, where our sense of place and what we built our lives on are falling apart or being questioned. Structures, expectations, understandings of how people are supposed to behave are all falling apart, and we're falling into a state of chaos to some degree. Would you agree with that? So I feel like this talk really needs to be not just about how to go with the flow of life, but how to go with the flow of life, death, and rebirth. The other talk would have been very natural and very maybe comfortable. This one maybe not as comfortable, but a lot more relevant, a lot more important in the time that we're living in right now. Because I really believe that we are called to not pretend that these things out there aren't happening and continue on our personal lives as if we're separate, because we're not separate. I believe that we are called into greater strength and compassion and connection with one another. I believe that we're called to bravery and courage and being able to see what's actually happening without running from it. I believe especially those of us that are called into a space like this are called to be leaders in this time. So our talk today is going to be about going with the flow of life, death, and rebirth. But I want to take a little bit of a side trail for a moment. And I promise you that this side trail is going to reconnect with that main trail in just a few minutes. So I want to tell you what I did over quarantine. So quarantine for my family was an opportunity to just spend a little bit more time with our teenage daughters before they headed to college. So a little bit more time before we were officially empty nesters. So for us, it was a really sacred and special time of family and connection and just being together. But there was also a lot of downtime. And for me in that downtime, well, I'm a learner. I am a chronic learner. I will never stop. I love the process of learning. I love bringing in new information and bumping it up against all the things I already think I know, because it shifts them and it adjusts them and it enhances them, and sometimes I end up having to discard them. But I just love the whole process of learning. I love to see how what I already know connects with this something new. So I decided to take a course from Dr. Sharon Blackie. If she's familiar to you, she's a mythologist and an author. She lives in Scotland. Extraordinary woman. And the course was called This Mythic Life. And it included archetypal cosmology and the ancestral arts and embodied imagination. And we studied myth and fairy tale, not the myths of our time, not the myths of falsehoods, but the myths, the great stories, right? And we studied all of these things, and it was extraordinary. The very last month, the topic was alchemy. And I'd never before in my life considered that I would approach alchemy and study alchemy. If I thought about alchemy, I thought maybe of men in funny hats, or maybe Mickey Mouse, right, with the blue and white hat, do you see it? And the red robe, trying to find the sorcerer's stone. But that's it. It didn't go any further than that. But I took this month of study of alchemy with Sharon Blackie, and I was floored. I would have never guessed that alchemy had something to tell me about my life and my path and my journey as a human being. But oh, did it ever. So So once the course was over, I went over to Present Moment Books and I bought them clear out of their alchemy books. Like the top shelf, just, brought the whole thing home. And I started studying. But I'm not someone who likes to study at just a head level. I really like to get hands-on. So a couple of the things I learned, first of all, alchemy originated in 300 BC, which makes it older than yoga and Chinese medicine and Buddhism. It in fact makes it the root of those traditions. So that was new and exciting information for me. And the next thing I learned are that those favorite expressions of mine, all is one, as above, so below, originated in alchemy. I always thought they came from yoga, but yoga got them from alchemy. So this was extraordinary, so I was already really excited. And then I learned that the Swiss psychologist, Dr. Carl Jung, saw alchemy as a roadmap for how we human beings can go through transformation. So how alchemy was, maybe we think about it as turning lead into gold. Carl Jung looked at it and saw, we can use this as a roadmap to turn what's leaded in us, what has become old, valueless, heavy, worthless, painful, into gold, enlightenment, healing, compassion, life lessons. So I decided I was going to learn this hands-on. And I wasn't going to try to turn lead into gold in my own house, but I did create an alchemical kitchen where I was going to work on transforming plants into elixirs. It was the same process. Whether you're transforming lead into gold, plant into elixirs, or a human being into an enlightened being, it's the same process. So I'm already somewhat familiar with herbs through my studies of Ayurveda, but I hadn't ever worked with them to the degree that I was going to be working with them now. In Ayurveda, I mostly used the herbs. We just either ingested them, or mixed them with oils, and we made healing patches, things like that. But with alchemy, I was going to be using these herbs on a whole different level. And so I grabbed some that I knew and some that I didn't know, but I made sure to grab several ones that each corresponded to a different day of the week. Because what I learned is that the herbs are associated to a day of the week, and then that day of the week is ruled by a planet. And so ideally, we want to work with the herbs on the day of the week that they're associated with so that the ruling planet can supply its energy as well. And ideally, even at the hour of the day of the planet. And this was completely new to me. I mean, I'd always just worked with herbs whenever it was convenient. But now I had to sometimes get up at 5 a.m. to work with the herbs at the right time. So this was fun. So I go back to present moment and I buy all these herbs and I try to get them in their original form, either the root or the leaf or the seeds. Because what I read is, as I'm going to be working with the herbs, the more I grind them myself in a mortar and pestle, there's already this energetic flow between us that's happening versus already buying them in powdered form. Sometimes I did that too. And then occasionally I couldn't get the herbs ground down in the mortar and pestle. And so I had to put them in the coffee grinder. And then the next morning my husband got coffee that had a little lemon balm in it left over from my grinding. But then I took the herbs, and now I had them all ground down, and saved them for the right day of the week. The next step, put the herb in a jar. Pour alcohol over the top, cover that with saran wrap, put the lid on, cover that with tin foil, and then put the whole thing next to the water heater in our basement, a nice dark but warm place. And I lined them up from the days of the week, Sunday through Saturday. And the next step wasn't going to be until 2 weeks, but each day my job was to go down and just shake them. Just shake them and maybe, just touch them a little bit and continue that energetic process, take care of them. And what I noticed happening as the 2 weeks passed was that the mixture was getting darker and darker and darker as the herbs disintegrated. They were going through this process of evaporation and then condensation because there was nowhere for them to go. So they grew darker and darker, and pretty soon they were indistinguishable from one another. They'd completely broken down into their core essential natures, what the alchemists call prima materia, or their primal matter. Once they had all been individual plants, right, with different looking different leaves and seeds, and now here they were all exactly the same. There's already a lesson in that. As I broke them down, as they disintegrated, as they melted down, everything looked the same. 2 weeks passed, and the next step is to bring them back upstairs and now to filter out the liquid. So I'd pour the contents through cheesecloth and some filters into another jar, and this right here is a tincture. It is the soul of the plant that I can now take as a remedy. Specifically, I can take it on the day of the week, right, that I'm making it and that I've assigned it to. And this is where a lot of different processes might have us throw away those now muddled herbs and the remainder. But this is where alchemy is different and says, that's the body of the plant. And we're not going to throw it away. We're going to take that through a process of transformation. But remember I told you that when I was studying with Sharon Blackie, we were also studying the great myths. One of the myths that we studied was called Eros and Psyche. And I want to tell you just a little bit about this myth because it relates directly to this stage of the process. So Eros and Psyche. Eros, the god of love, also known as Cupid. The son of Aphrodite, also known as Venus, the goddess of love and beauty. Psyche was a human woman, a beautiful human woman. And Psyche and Eros fell in love. But they did so in secret because if Aphrodite found out, they knew they were going to be in trouble. But you can only keep things from a goddess for so long. And eventually Aphrodite found out that they were in love, and she flew into a rage and she kidnapped Psyche. And then she told Psyche that she was going to have to complete these very difficult tasks, impossible tasks. Now, let me tell you what I love about Psyche as the heroine of this story. Psyche, every single time she gets one of these tasks, breaks down in tears. She cries all the time. And I love that because there's some of these ideas, especially in some of modern culture, of these female heroines that are, strong and brave and powerful, and our male heroes too, right? And I guess I relate a little more with Psyche. I relate a little bit more to feeling overwhelmed and just breaking down into tears than feeling that strength and conviction. So I like her for that. One of the tasks that Aphrodite gives Psyche is she brings her into a room. And in the center of the room, there is a pile, a huge mound of mixed seeds and grains. And Aphrodite says to her, have this sorted into separate piles by morning. And true to nature, Psyche breaks down in tears and stares at this mound before her. How is she possibly going to have this sorted by morning? Because the or else was understood, right? So I want to read to you what happened next. Psyche sat there motionless, gazing at the stupendously disordered mass. As she sat, a very small ant, a dweller of the open fields, understanding the difficulty of her gigantic task and feeling for Psyche, the wife of love itself, scurried hither and thither to round up every ant in the region, gathering a great host to assist her in her time of need. Wave upon wave of little creatures worked furiously to separate and restock the entire confused heap, grain by grain. Soon, every grain was piled according to its type, and the ants disappeared from sight. One of the things that's wonderful about myth, and I learned this in my studies, is that it can mean so many different things to different people at different times in their lives. So if when you heard that, that gave you some kind of a truth or an aha about something in your journey, then know that that is true. But I also want to tell you a couple of things that I take away from this particular myth and how it relates to this second stage of the process. The first is that this is a task of diligence and patience. You need to call up your inner ant, the ant within all of us, the part of you that is patient and careful and willing to do this painstaking, difficult work of sorting through all of this stuff that's broken down, of what matters to you and what doesn't. You might have gone through your entire life at this point, achieving solutions through strength and power. And now you have to tap into a whole nother side of you, the part of you that slows down, the part of you that realizes that this is going to take some time. The other thing I take away from this is that we're always going to get help. Now, in Psyche's case, had Thor shown up with his hammer, right? I mean, wrong tradition, but Thor, what good would he have done for her in this situation? You know, had Hercules shown up in his mighty strength and says, I'm here to save you? What good is Hercules in this stage? We need the ant. We need that smaller creature, that kind of part of us. But it does say that they will come, that we will have help. She actually does sleep through some of the night. She does not wake up red-eyed. She rests, and a lot of the work is done while she sleeps. A lot of the work is done in the subconscious. Because here's the thing. I said that Psyche isn't necessarily your traditional brave heroine, right? But you know what she didn't do? She didn't leave the room. She didn't walk away. She didn't bang on the door and demand to be let out. She sat and waited until the work was done. So the next morning, Aphrodite comes in and sees that the task has been completed and then just sends her on yet another task. But eventually, spoiler alert, she does complete all 4 tasks, and Aphrodite now has no choice but to acknowledge that Psyche really is worthy of Eros. And so it is at this point that Aphrodite creates a ceremony to transform Psyche from a human woman into a goddess. She doesn't become a goddess because she was brave. She doesn't become a goddess because of her strength or her power or her might, but because she was willing to go through the stages of transformation and sit and do the work. The third and final stage of the alchemical stage of transformation is the Rubido Stage, or the red stage. So called because as those ashes continue to burn, they eventually turn and glow red. So called because blood, because life. This is the rejuvenation. This is the phoenix out of the ashes. This is your rebirth. This is when you get to go back into the world and maybe play with some identities and some labels and some roles once again. But hopefully this time with a little lighter touch. Because if one thing the dark nights of the soul teach us is that these labels and roles are an illusion, that they really aren't the true us. The true us was somewhere in that pile of rubble. Now is the time to re-inspire yourself, to surround yourself with people who can support you in this rebirth stage. But remember, you're like a newborn baby, and you need to care for yourself as such. Because if you immediately go into your rebirth and you begin to take on all kinds of roles and responsibilities again, it's going to be really easy to tell yourself that all that stuff that happened was just a dream, or you just made it up, or it didn't matter. And if you go back into some of the old places that you once knew, or where your original beliefs came from, it's going to be really easy to put them right back on again. Because you're fragile, your skin is brand new. So this is a time of also patience, of deep self-care, of treating yourself like the newborn baby as you get your legs underneath you again. And then you can go play out in the world again with the roles and the identities, just each time a little lighter. I like to call them skins, because I like to think of the snake that simply sheds its skin every now and then and says, well, I'm done with that one. What's next? You know, the snake always gets a little irritable right before it's ready to shed its skin. I feel the same. That's that beginning of the dark night of the soul. There's something that's just not right. The skin is getting too tight. Something isn't fitting. But then the snake doesn't fight it, right? It just goes and finds a rock and starts doing the work. Let's see what's under here. This is the rebirth stage. This is when the body is reunited with the soul. If you ask me what enlightenment is, I will not say that enlightenment is some kind of out-of-body experience of transcendence and getting away from all of this. Enlightenment to me is really about embodiment, about getting in our bodies, about getting in this world, about being participants, and about being willing to go through the stages of transformation, to be able to go through the life and the death and the rebirth cycles, to flow through them with ease and grace and wisdom. That's enlightenment, the willingness to flow through the stages of life, death, and rebirth. Thank you. All right, well, let's just start here by sending a little energy around the room. So I'm going to squeeze the hand on my left, and let's just send it all the way around. And just let your eyes close. I just want to remind you that we all do have within us the strength and the conviction and the patience and the diligence to do this work. That we're made for it on some level, that we weren't born here to simply go in one direction or simply grow up. We're also meant to grow down, to retreat, to go inward. And we're meant to take the wisdom that we gain from our personal lives and our personal growth into the world and share it. It's not just for us. Spirituality means nothing if it's not shared. But first, grounding ourselves down into the earth here, feeling the earth beneath your feet. And imagine roots growing from your feet, the bottoms of your feet. Imagine them extending down down into the floor and then into the earth. And as these red roots descend, picture them intertwining with everybody else's in this room and outside of this room. Let the roots keep spreading wide as they go deeper. And imagine them eventually taking hold at the center of the earth, and feel your whole body, mind, and spirit click in to that support like you're plugged in. And then begin to breathe in through the nostrils, breathing in energy from the earth and out through the nostrils. Drawing it up and knowing that it is an abundant source of nutrients, of support, of connection and belonging. Draw it up and let it eventually come back to the bottoms of your feet, filling up your feet, and then letting that red energy move up your legs, filling them with this supportive, grounding energy. Not so much that you feel locked, but that you feel strong, that you feel your life force in your legs, in your knees, in your hips, as it touches every single cell. And then let it overflow into the pelvic bowl. And then bring your awareness to the base of your spine, to the tip of your tailbone. And now breathe in and up the spine, one vertebrae at a time. Drawing that energy up through the vertebrae, through the spine, and through the chakras. Through the root chakra, the sacral, solar plexus, the heart. Through the heart and lungs, down the arms, and up into the throat chakra, and the third eye chakra, and then let it continue up through the crown of your head in a beam of now white light extending up into the heavens. See it reaching up and also expanding out to connect to everyone else in this room, so it's one giant halo over all of us. And then once you're connected to the heavens, begin to once again breathe in and down energy and support from the heavens, openness, connection, lightness, a sense of our soul, a sense of ourself as spirit. Bringing that down into the body where it mingles with that earth energy. We are the elixir. We are the combination of spirit and body. This is who we are. It is what we're made for. And slowly drop your chin to your chest. Let your eyes open. Release your hands to your heart center. Thumbs gently resting on the breastbone. Thanking yourself for being here today, for taking this in. Dropping your chin to your chest once again. Namaste. Thank you.